Lee and Bud entered Macon. Both were on high alert and looking around for walkers. They couldn't just hear the distant buzzing sound of the pharmacy alarm, which meant the walkers were no longer distracted by the noise. It would mean that Kenny and Carly can do their job, but it also meant that everyone had to be cautious while out doing a run in Macon. The two brothers carried a melee weapon, a gallon of gasoline for the truck, handguns which were in their holsters. They also knew that handguns were the last resort only. Lee gripped his axe tighter while Bud looked around for any sign of walkers. "Okay, what do we need?" Bud whispered. "Do we need baby food?" "No, I don't think. I think she's outgrown that. We need a high chair, a crib, and a car seat. Probably wouldn't hurt to get a couple more pacifiers, sippy cups, a package of diapers, a package of baby wipes, and some baby books," Lee whispered. He continued to look around. "Okay, so how are we going to find a crib?" Bud said. "The truck will run it forward, fill it up, and get the crib on there," Bud Lee said. "Okay, what about the changing table?" Bud asked. "Does she need one of those?" "We don't have enough room for it. Besides, I've been doing fine with the changing mat. I'm more worried that I'll toss and turn in my sleep and squish her," Lee said. "I see. That's why we need the crib," Bud said. "Alright, we should be fine. I know Macon like the back of my hand." "Same here," Lee said with a smirk. "It's been a while, but not much has changed." "Yeah, kinda sad of see what's happened. Used to be a really good place to live," Bud said. They walked further down the road in silence. They had no idea if there were going to be any walkers that would jump up and surprise them. They had noticed them in the middle of the town was blocked off by several walkers. Bud looked around until he noticed an alleyway. "This way," he whispered. Then he went down the alleyway. Lee remembered this alley as a kid. He used to cut across it as a kid to get to a friend's house faster. Bud stopped in his tracks when he saw a couple of walkers at the exit of the alleyway. "Damn it," Bud muttered as one of the walkers staggered towards him. Another walker took notice and got to its feet. Bud put a gallon of gasoline down and waited for the walker to get closer. Lee readied himself with the axe. He would be able to take out the other walker. Bud huffed as the walker got closer. In one quick move, he stabbed the walker in the head. The undead creature fell to the ground with a thud. Lee turned back towards the other walker and hacked it, and with its head in the axe. The walker became limp and fell to the ground. Lee dug out his axe, and both men continued down the alleyway. Bud looked around until he gave the signal to go. Now that they had went around in the center of the town using the alleyway, it'd be easier to get to the truck. Once they reached the truck, they filled it up with gasoline and went to a local baby store. Lee drove down the road, of course. He would have to go the long way to avoid wrecked cars, scattered debris, and walkers. "So, Bud, how did you become the leader of the group? You seem to be the youngest aside from that Glenn guy who took off," Lee said. "Well, you saw as well, Larry's an asshole. Lily's too strict and stern. The rest of them weren't too keen on becoming leader, so I stepped up," Bud said. "Well, you're doing it pretty well so far," Lee said. "Thanks," Bud said. "You know, Mom and Dad, they didn't resent you, not even at the end." "Yeah, I wish I could have made up somehow," Lee said. "You are. Mom and Dad would be proud that you saved a baby and now you're taking care of her," Bud said. "But you have to keep doing the right thing until her parents find us. If they're even alive." Lee nodded and said, "Thanks, Bud. I don't think her parents made it. I got 3 messages on the answering machine at her house, and well, it didn't sound too good." "Damn it," Bud muttered. It didn't take them long to arrive at the baby store. There weren't too many walkers out in the parking lot. They would still have their hands full. Lee parked the truck and turned it off. "Ready?" Lee said. "Yeah, just don't use your hand gun unless you have no other choice. Noise distract these things," Bud said. "Got it," Lee said. The two brothers climbed out of the truck and ran over to the walkers that blocked their way. Together they managed to kill the walkers in the parking lot. A couple of walkers inside they also killed. "All right," Lee huffed. "It had been a long half hour killing the walkers. Let's grab what we need to get out of here." "Agreed," Bud said. Lee went ahead and grabbed a car seat while also grabbing a few more pacifiers and a few more sippy cups. He also went outside and placed them onto the truck. He was thankful that the store's alarm didn't work anymore since it required electricity. Bud was out there already with some baby books in hands. Next, he grabbed a package of diapers and a package of wipes while Bud got out a high chair to the truck. The last they needed was to get a crib. The crib provided to be a challenge. Once they got it outside, they had to place it on the back of the truck. Then they had to keep it from rolling over the place as they drove home. They tied it down with some rope. "Okay, I think we got it," Lee said. "Yeah, let's get back to the motor inn," Bud said. The two brothers climbed into the truck and Lee drove off down the road. It didn't take long to get back to the motor inn. While being in the truck, Lee noticed that a couple of the vehicles was replaced with dumpsters. It acted as a gate. The dumpsters were moved back as Lee drove the vehicle in the motor inn. Lee parked the vehicle and got out. He noticed that Katja was walking up to him. "Hey, how did everything go?" Lee asked. He was wondering why Duck and Clementine weren't with her. Katja nodded her head and said, "Stressful." Lee frowned it. "She couldn't have been that bad," Lee said. "Oh, she wasn't," Katja said. "She did have a temper tantrum, but that's normal for her age, and she's very close to nap time. Ducky got upset because I wasn't paying attention to him, like I normally did, wherever it was spiral out of control, so he's in timeout right now." "I'm sorry, Katja. We might have to split up the duties from now on," Lee said. "It's no problem, Lee. Today was just the first. We all have our rough first days," Katja said. "Well, thanks for looking after her. I appreciate it," Lee said. "Certainly, I'm glad that I had her," Katja said. "Hey, Lee, help me with this stuff," Bud said. "Got it," Lee said. He walked over to the truck bed and helped Bud get the baby supplies from inside the room that he and Clementine shared. By the time Lee and Bud finished moving everything, Clementine was starting to wake up from the bed she was in. "Someone's up," Bud said. "Yep," Lee said. He walked over and picked up the toddler. She yawned as he picked her up. Lee held her and asked, "Did you have a nice nap?" Clementine nodded in response. She was still a bit tired, but Lee knew that she would soon be scurrying around. Lee chuckled and walked outside with her. He sat her down on the chair and placed her on his lap. He decided that a game would help her wake up. "Okay, Clem, where's your nose?" Clementine smiled and said, "Here." She touched her small nose. "Very good, where's your eyes?" Lee asked. "Here," Clementine said, pointed at one of her eyes. "Good job, where's your mouth?" Lee said. "Here," Clementine said as she pointed to her mouth. "Very good, where's your hair?" Lee asked. "Here," Clementine said as she gestured to the curly, dark brown hair. "Good job," Lee said. "You're too smart." Clementine giggled in response. "Which reminds me," Lee said. He went for his pocket and pulled out a chocolate bar. Clementine smiled and unwrapped it. In less than a second, she snagged it from him. Lee chuckled and patted her back, let her enjoy the chocolate bar. She deserved it. She had been a very good girl for him. Once she had some chocolate in her, she was off. She ran around the motor inn on a sugar rush, as Lee kept an eye on her. Bud chuckled and said, "Well, no more chocolate for her." "She earned it. She's a very good girl," Lee said. "Yeah, she's kind of sweet, Bud said. Clementine ran over and placed her hands on Lee's good knee. "Tag, you it!" she exclaimed, before she scampered off away from Lee. Lee chuckled and said, "Well, I better go wear her out." "Good luck," Bud said. Lee looked over to Clementine and smiling and huffing. She squealed and ran off when she saw Lee coming towards her. Lee smirked and ran up to catch her. Clementine continued to laugh as he did her best to get away from Lee, but it didn't take him long to catch up to her. Lee smirked and said, "Come here, I'm gonna get you." He pretended to reach out and try to get her. Clementine laughed and squealed some more as she tried to avoid capture. Lee finally picked her up and tickled her with his beard. Clementine laughed and squealed in his grip until he dropped. Lee looked over the girl with a smile as she huffed and cradled into him. He had cradled her in his arms, and Lee carried over to a play area where she allowed her to color for a little while. She seemed very content for the rest of the day. Lee and Clementine walked into the room at nighttime. It had been a long day for the group, but it was productive. Kenny and Carly got food, water, medical supplies, and candles from the pharmacy. There was a candle set up in each room, so there was a source of light at nighttime. Plus, Vince and Justin came back with tools and equipment. The group would have to make a run at some point to get guns and ammo. This run would probably take them to the nearby military Air Force base. "Did you have fun today?" Lee asked. Clementine then looked up and smiled at him before she nodded at her head. "It's fun," Clementine said. "You tired?" Lee asked. Clementine nodded her head. She certainly looked tired. Lee walked over and grabbed her similar supplies that he had gathered from her last night, took off her dress, changed her diaper, and placed her nightgown on. He then got up and cradled her in his arms. He walked over to the bed and placed a bottle in her mouth. She would eventually outgrow the bottle and have him read bedtime stories from the lack of books that he and Bud got from the baby store. But as of now, he put the bottle to put her to sleep rather easily. Soon the bottle was empty, but the toddler's eyes were barely open. She wasn't asleep yet, so Lee placed the bottle on the ground and placed a pacifier in her mouth. It only took a couple more minutes for her eyes to close and for her to be in a deep sleep. Clementine smiled as he went over to the crib and laid her down in the bed. He tucked her in the bed and smiled. She was adorable. He turned and blew out the candle just before he went to bed himself. Several days passed until Bud had called everyone alongside with Doug Clementine. Katja stayed back to keep an eye on them. "Okay, we need to have a serious discussion about firepower. We don't have that many guns with us and our ammo is running low. We need to take whatever we have left and go on a run to get more," Bud said. "So what do you suggest?" Vince said. "Well, Lily, Kenny, Lee, and I go to Warner Robins. We'll see if there's a way to get in and get the supplies," Bud said. "That'll leave you in charge, Vince." Vince nodded his head and said, "Okay, stay safe." "Will do," Bud said. "I'll need a few minutes to gather up the weapons we got. Then we'll be heading out." "Alright, how about you show me where this place is?" Kenny said to Lily. "Yeah," Lily said. They walked over to the truck, while Bud went over to retrieve a couple guns. Lee, on the other hand, turned over to Clementine. He saw that she was scribbling with a crayon. "Hey, Sweet Pea, can you be a good girl for Katja again? Bud's going to take me out on another run." Clementine looked up and frowned. "Okay," she said. She was used to it by now. Lee would have to go on runs every so often so he could provide for the group. Still, she never liked it when he left. "Thank you again, honey. I'll be back," Lee said. He kissed the toddler on the top of the head before he got back up. He looked over to Katja to see if she was up for the task of watching Clementine again. "Don't worry, I've gotten better at watching them at the same time," Katja said. "Thanks, Katja. I'll be back soon, hopefully," Lee said. Katja nodded in response, and Lee walked over to Kenny, Lily, and Bud. "Hey, you ready to go?" Bud asked. "Yeah," Lee said. "Alright, let's hit the road," Kenny said. He and Lily got in the front seat while Lee and Bud got in the back seat. Kenny started the truck while Vince and Justin pushed the dumpsters away so the truck could pass through. Kenny drove the truck out of the motor inn and down the road. They were off to Warner Robins, the Air Force military space.